Ron Jess for Jessfor30, and I want to welcome Dr. Scott Ellsworth, University of Michigan professor, New York Times best-selling author. And Scott had received his PhD from Duke in 1982. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Ron. Glad to be here.
Nice to meet you. I looked up your bio last night, and I thought I'd start with some Irish humor about a Scott Ellsworth.
Okay.
But I was afraid I really ticked my wife off when I used too much of the Irish humor. She's Italian, and they don't laugh or have fun.
I spent my honeymoon in Ireland, so I'm good with Ireland.
Oh yeah. We took our 3 kids there when they were in college and high school, and it was fun.
All right.
We have family in Northern Ireland.
Sure.
Port Stewart, Port Rush,
Yeah.
Giants Causeway.
Yeah.
You've done all that?
We did 2 weeks. We drove the whole island.
Isn't that something? The
Yeah.
whole island.
Yeah.
Wow. That was, you were on the move.
Yeah, we were.
We took a train up from Dublin up into Belfast, and then they picked us up, and we had, I think, my sister and her 3 kids and our 3 kids, and we had, 15 pieces of luggage, and they come to pick us up in these little, like, Yugos.
Right.
We were sitting, it was horrible, but it was a great trip,
Yeah.
So the guy I just got to say, you probably hear this all, Scott Ellsworth.
Right.
He was born in 1927, big radio man.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of him, right.
Yeah, that's what comes up.
Right.
So my question to you, Scott, is if you could just give us your kind of your who, what, when, where, from when you were born, the beginning of your life.
Okay. So I was born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the son of a petroleum geologist and a homemaker. I'm the 3rd of 3 kids. Grew up in a middle-class home, attended public schools in Tulsa. I was, athletic. I come from a scouting family. My dad was an Eagle Scout. My brother was. I am.
Wow.
Our 2 sons are. Relatively happy kid. I end up going to a small college in Portland, Oregon, Reed College, where I made my big mistake. And my big mistake was there was a guy, very small school, less than 1,000 students. There was a guy in my freshman class who was really into computers named Steve, and I didn't drop out with Steve Jobs and found Apple computers, which some of my classmates did, and they are bazillionaires now. But at any rate, I ended up becoming a history major at Reed, and then I went on to Duke for graduate school.
Well, as smart as you are, don't you?
About that.
Don't you know money is the root of all evil, Scott?
Well, that's good. I've managed to avoid it so far.
Me too. But, we grew up eating bologna, and, I've talked about it, Tory Sicky here and powdered milk, and 2 blue-collar parents who sent 8 kids to Catholic schools.
Right.
But wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
Sure.
You didn't know you didn't have money.
Right. Just what it was.
Didn't matter. You
Yeah.
had your buddies and your bicycle, and they'd hop on the handlebars, and you'd go and play football and baseball. We had a field like you. We
Right.
were athletes. We were quarterbacks and pitchers. I love to pitch.
Right.
There's nothing like a baseball game, 7th inning, and there's 2 outs in the bottom of the 7th in
Right.
high school, and you have a no-hitter going, and you do that a few times, and that'll get your blood moving.
Absolutely.
Yes.
No question about that.
If you've played baseball, you could understand. Did you play ball?
I did. I played Little League, and then I was a little basketball, a little bit of football, but then I was a swimmer in high school.
Okay. Well, my wife taught Catholic school and then middle school social studies for 25 years, and our kids all went through there. And then she was a principal at Central Academy on Industrial Boulevard, mostly 95% Muslim school.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we're going to get into a lot of race talk here and cultural talk and history. And I'm excited. Muhammad Isa owns that charter school she was at, Central Academy, and about 20 other ones.
Mm-hmm.
And Louis Shelby was the principal. And I'll tell you this, from our experience with their culture and being invited to weddings like at the old Dearborn Hyatt Regency where there's just water and they do things they do everything their way, and they invite and they have 700 1,000 people at the wedding. And we experienced it with my son a little bit. He married into an Armenian family. And she just came out of there with respect, and they gave it to her too. Her dad was a colonel in the Army, so you can understand that. And she was happy with it. So her question, and she wrote down a question for you. So coming out of high school, there's varying degrees of knowledge of American history.
Right.
And that must be a real challenge for you when these kids come or from other countries. They don't know American history today.
Well, I think that some of that's exaggerated. I mean, they still teach American history in public schools and things like that. So people are going to have some sense of it. But I think that we've certainly fallen down in that we don't teach civics anymore, and civics the way that we used to. So in my day, everyone had, at least a year of civics in junior high school, have a good sense of the Constitution, of the working of American government, things like that. And a lot of those classes have gone by the wayside. So I think you've got a lot of people in the country, or couple generations of people who don't really have a really firm grasp on how the American government works, what the sharing of power is, and things like that. American history is, one thing I learned very early on when I was at the Smithsonian is that the American public is really interested in American history, but they're not interested in the way that most scholars and academics write about it. And they like to have accessible things. Certainly the History Channel and things like that have done a lot to broaden some knowledge. But I think it's our history is very important. We have to learn the bad as well as the good. And that's true in our lives. You have to understand where you are, where you come from, and where it's at. But I think it's very important for us as a society.
So why do you think social media is so negative toward U.S. history and actually world history there? So social media is just really, or media in general.
Okay.
Let's put it that way.
I guess I don't know that I've noticed that much. So I'm not sure, but I've heard stories, every generation is going to complain about young people and what they do and what they don't know and things like that. So I think that's fairly common. There have been lots of complaints about, how well or not well prepared some students are for college these days. Certainly students took a lot of hit during COVID. I mean, that slowed down a lot of things. But, I've noticed, at least my students at the University of Michigan they're certainly open to learning new things. Some of them come really well prepared, and others, they may not be as well prepared, but they've got a lot of common sense and can kind of figure things out.
Yeah, no, I certainly wasn't knocking the kids at all.
Sure.
I have a lot of faith in them. Really, I think the younger generations are great. They've been tossed a little harder life than maybe you and I grew up with. Let's face it. You had buddies probably in the neighborhood. Like we had a field next to our house, and you'd have 15 kids out there, 16,
Sure.
to play ball. Well,
Sure.
they have to drive or, all the practices,
Well, it's just different. Youth sports were different. There weren't families whose weekends and evenings were taken up on travel teams because they're trying to, to get in this college or do all of that. I mean, with Little League in my day, I think we practiced maybe just once or twice a week, and then there was a game on whenever it was, Saturday or whatnot, and then you went on. But there was a lot of pickup ball. A lot of people were playing baseball or football or whatever all the time. I don't see kids as much out as much anymore, and one reason is the fact that in our day or my day, there were 3 television networks. And, there wasn't a lot to watch. And certainly nobody had iPhones and or on laptops. So you were outside a lot more. And I think that that's changed. And there's going to be a bit more loneliness and people not quite used to having to cooperate with your neighbor kids, whether you're going to play a game or something like that. And we play from, the beginning of the day until, after dark. I mean,
Streetlights came on.
and things like that. So I think there have been differences in that. Absolutely.
Well, we're going to get to this right out of the gates here.
Okay.
This is Scott's book, The Secret Game, and I guess the question right away is, what led you to write this book?
Sure. So that's my second book. I'd written a book earlier about a very horrific event in my hometown known as the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921. And I had moved on. I was at the Smithsonian Institution at the National Museum of American History, where I was a historian there. I was also starting to write for newspapers and get involved with film work. And I was looking for a new subject to write about. And I wanted to write about something I was comfortable writing about, but also something that I really liked. So I'd written about race relations. I was comfortable writing about that. I'd been trained as an American historian. But I'd also been a basketball fan for, most of my life. And then when I went to North Carolina, to Duke, I caught the disease for which there was no cure, which is the ACC disease. And I became a huge, big-time college basketball fan. And as I'm at the Smithsonian thinking about things, what do I want to write about? I started thinking about writing about the history of basketball. I got to tell you a couple things. First of all, in those days, which is, way back in the 90s and even before then, there was a saying in publishing circles in New York City about sports books. And the saying was, the smaller the ball, the better the book. And it was really true. There was a great literature of baseball, all about fathers and sons and autumn and death and poetry and all this stuff. There was a wonderful literature of tennis. There was a terrific literature of golf. But the books about basketball and football, frankly, weren't very good. And so I started thinking about that, and I was thinking about basketball back in the 1920s and 30s. Those games were like chess matches. In a thriller last night in Ann Arbor, the Wolverines nipped the Spartans, 18-12. The games were very slow. By the time I'm growing up in the late 60s, early 70s, basketball is this fast-paced, acrobatic game that people really loved. And I was trying to think how that had changed, how that had happened as a historian. So I start looking into this and do a lot of reading and lots of research. And I knew that race was part of the story, but it wasn't the whole story. So I said, well, let me see if I can figure out that. Maybe I can write a book about a turning point during this period, figure out that. It became clear to me very early on that it was college basketball was where the action was. That's where it's happening. And so then I found my perfect story, I thought. I was going to write about the 1957 Final Four, the men's Final Four. This was it was the University of San Francisco, a tiny Jesuit school, was the two-time defending national champion. Michigan State was in it. And since I teach at the University of Michigan, I can't talk about them. That's a joke.
No.
Also,
I watched the game Saturday.
The most storied college basketball program in the country, University of Kansas, was in it, and they had the most sought-after high school basketball player ever in the form of Wilt Chamberlain. And finally, there was the University of North Carolina, which was still segregated at the time. So you had these four teams. The civil rights movement has begun. Television is starting to come in. Money is starting to come in. Wilt Chamberlain showed up in Lawrence, Kansas, driving a brand new Cadillac. He didn't get that washing dishes in North Philadelphia.
For sure.
So I thought, here's a great deal. There was lots of triple overtime games. So I spent years tracking down the players, interviewing the coaches, doing the research about this game, and I was all set to write it. And then I made a big mistake. And my mistake was, so to speak, I went to the Basketball Hall of Fame, which is in Springfield, Massachusetts. Ron, why is the Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Massachusetts? Any idea?
No.
That's where James Naismith invented the game
Okay.
of basketball at the YMCA training school. He was told on a Friday to invent a new game. He had to have it in by Monday, and he did. So at any rate, they had a wonderful library there, and I went there for like a long weekend looking at microfilm and all that, and, you know, getting kind of bleary-eyed. And there was also having an induction ceremony for that year's inductees to the Hall of Fame. So I kind of wandered down to the auditorium, and I'm just standing in the back. And it's not a super impressive group of inductees. There were a couple of okay NBA players. There was a Russian coach, whatnot. And I'm just kind of just taking a break, you know, listening to things. And this elderly African-American gentleman sidles up to me. He says, "My name is John McClendon." And I thought, oh, John McClendon. He's in the Hall of Fame for something. I can't remember why. And he's kind of checking me out, and I'm talking to him. And he mentions casually that he had known James Naismith. This is James Naismith, who had invented basketball 100 years earlier. And I was thinking, you knew James Naismith? And then I said, oh, then I realized, oh, that's right. McClendon was one of this handful of black players, black students at Kansas in the 1930s. And that's where Naismith ended his career. So that's the connection. So we just start talking about it. And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, you know, I really ought to interview this John McClendon kind of about the backstory for Kansas, one of my Final Four teams from 1957. So I get his contact information. He lives in outside of Cleveland. I get back home. I think I'm in D.C. at this point. And I call the sports editor of the New York Times I'd written a couple stories for. And I said, hey, Neil, I'd like to write a story about John McClendon. He said, well, who the hell's John McClendon? I explained, well, he's this African-American coach. You know, they're having a 50th year anniversary of this black college tournament. And I want to do a story about him and how hard it was for African-American college coaches back during segregation to go on road trips to recruit people and all that stuff. He said, yeah, sure, that's fine. So I go and fly to Cleveland, go to McClendon's house. We have a wonderful interview at his kitchen table. And, you know, I get my story and all that stuff. And they says, oh, wait a minute, I got something to show you. So he goes upstairs to his upstairs office. He comes down and he's got these, you know, type pieces of paper, like 3 or 4 stapled together. And at the top it says, "Racial Firsts in Basketball I Have Been Involved in," by John B. McClendon Jr. And McClendon was this great pioneer. He was the first African-American coach to win a national college championship, the NAIA in the 1950s when he was at Tennessee State. He was the first African-American coach in the NBA. He was the first African-American coach, African-American assistant Olympic coach for the U.S. Olympic basketball team, on and on, the first black coach at a historically white institution. But at the top it says, first integrated college basketball game in the South, Duke Navy Medical School versus North Carolina College for Negroes, 1944. And I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, well, this, you know, whatever this was, this guy sure can't type because there's no way this happened in 1944. I'm thinking, so I said, Coach, just like 1950 or 55 or something? He says, no, it's 1944, starts talking about it. And Ron, at exactly that moment, all those years of my book on the 1957 Final Four were torpedoed to sink beneath the sea, and I was on the search of this larger story. So that's how I got there.
No, that's incredible. I mean, it's I got the gist of the book, and you know, a lot of the book, there is this racial thing that has gotten better. I mean, you're at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and times have changed, right? You feel for the better as far as that goes.
Well, I think that we made, if you talk to people who, you know, I've been lucky enough to talk to a lot of people over the past 45 years, blacks and whites who grew up under segregation and things like that. There's no question that life has changed. There's also no question that we've got a long ways to go as well. But what attracted to me to this story in part, first was Coach McClendon, who is one of the giants of basketball. He's really the perfecter of the fast break. Nobody did that before him. He introduced full court pressure defense. He also introduced modern conditioning way back in the 1930s and 1940s, and had his players out running in the country in their Chuck Taylor shoes. Worked his players. He had at this little dinky college in North Carolina, he had the highest scoring basketball team in the world. In those days, basketball teams would score maybe 40, 50 points a game. His North Carolina College Eagles scored 70, 80, 90 points a game. They beat St. Augustine's 112 to 26 or something like that. So he was way ahead of the time. But he was also the last student of James Naismith, who had invented basketball. And he learned certain things from Naismith and other great coaches and then created this new game. So that was of interest to me. But also, the more I got into this story, so, there's this secret game that McClendon's team and an all-white team from Duke have in a locked gym on a Sunday morning when everyone, including the racist Durham police, are in church. They hold this game. It's this great breakthrough. But there was something else I also learned, which is we often talk about the civil rights movement as something that begins when Rosa Parks refuses to get off her seat in the bus in Montgomery, and we have the Montgomery bus boycott. But what I learned, there was a whole generation of people in the South, largely black, but some whites too, who are pushing against these immoral segregation laws. And it's really a story about them, and it's a story about how societies change. So, Ron, I've given you a mouthful here, on and on and on, but that gives you a sense of sort of how I got to the story and why I wanted to tell the story. And the other thing is I wanted to, connect basketball to American history. Basketball is a North American invention, invented by a Canadian in Massachusetts. It's one of our gifts to the world. But it's also been something that's reflected our history and helped to change it as well, too. Everybody will talk about Jackie Robinson, how important he was in desegregating the major leagues, and it's quite true. But in most American communities, the first time that all white schools had African-American athletes or played against African-American athletes was often in basketball in high school games, in middle school games and things like that. So it's been a force for change as well.
Yeah, no question. I was thinking about you, and we had an old prosecutor here. I shouldn't call him old. He's about 83.
Right.
He's a friend. My wife taught his kids at St. Joe's and Howell. And he was talking about when he got out of Michigan State Law School, Tom Kaiser is his name, and he got out of law school at Michigan State. It wasn't even Michigan State at the time. It was so long ago, but he came down to Howell, and he just was going to be an attorney. I think his dad was too.
Right.
So what he did, Scott, was he got there, and the prosecutor wasn't evidently a great guy. A lot of enemies, so he ran for prosecutor. I don't think he had been out of school for a year.
Right.
And he's a prosecutor for Howell. And guess who's out in Howell? Miles. I believe his name was John Miles. He was leader of the Grand Dragon for the Ku Klux Klan, just outside of Howell.
Yeah.
You've heard all the Howell stories,
sure,
right? That's a bad rep. Those people don't deserve this. Miles, whatever, he decided to settle out there in Cohocton, which isn't even really in Howell, and Howell takes that all the time. If one little incident happens, the KKK comes up, and it's all BS. I've got so many friends in Howell and Brighton and Heartland, and this is not a racist area. It's a lily white area. I'm going to say 98% probably. I don't know the exact number, but certainly 95 at least percent white out here. And people are moving out here, and We came here. I don't ever dodge what the truth was. We lived in Ohio, Medina, Ohio. We had a beautiful home. You ever been to Medina? It's
I
like
don't think so.
Mayberry RFD of I think Andy Griffith and Barney Fife are going to come down walking down the street.
Right.
Beautiful.
I
Town
think
square.
Howell or Brighton was a sundown town. You ever heard of sundown towns?
No.
So sundown towns were towns, particularly in the early 20th century, end of the 19th century, that had laws that said if you're black or if you're Jewish, you have to leave town by sundown, and else you can get arrested and whatnot. And they were all over the country.
Are you sure? You sure about that?
I'm pretty sure that I know that Pontiac, Michigan was a sundown town.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that Brighton or Howell was. I'm not exactly sure. You can look them up. There's a historian.
We'll lay that on Howell.
Well,
We've been in Brighton for 30 years.
They're, across. And the other thing about the Klan is that people forget is that, there were 3 different clans. There was a Klan at the end of the Civil War, which was in the South, and its goal was to keep black men from voting and using murder and terror, intimidation, lynching, and whatnot. But there was a second Klan that was founded in 1915. Was very big in the 20s. It was in every state in the United States. It was in Michigan. It ran the state governments in New Jersey, in Oregon, in Oklahoma. There were Klansmen in Maine and Vermont and California. So that's an echo of all of this as well, too. And that's part of our history that a lot of people don't like to talk about, but it's something we need to face up. And that Klan it wasn't simply anti-black. They were anti-Catholic. In Indiana, the Klan made sure that Catholic school teachers were fired from the public schools, and it anti-Semitic as well, too. So that's part of our past that some people find very difficult to talk about, but it's part of who we are.
It's funny you talk about this race and race relations, and I remember in the 70s and 80s reading, and I it's a hot button, like Trump and Harris is a hot button right now, but a hot button when we were kids. I remember reading the newspapers, and I would read and read and read. Got that from my dad, would read it cover to cover. I mean, because when it was delivered every day, and Sunday's paper was about 3 inches thick. But I remember thinking that we weren't treating the Arabs very well. And a lot of people thought Muslim, Arab, whatever. What I'm saying is I recognized that early on. It seemed like everything we did was to jab them. And I've got nothing against the Jewish people, and none of them, not either side. But I'm saying I think our country, and you know what it is? This is what I believe, because their skin's a little darker, the Arabs. And that's not my wife's Italian. I always tell her.
Darker than you, certainly, right?
Well, my wife's is a little darker than mine, too. She's Italian, but that seems to be an issue sometimes, and it's quite a bit darker. The Muslims and the Arab people, don't you think? I mean, that's a fact. I mean, it's not. It's just the way it is. But I think we're pretty much a racist country. We always have been.
Okay, all right. Well, we got a lot of work to do. There's no question about that.
Well, and I think the young kids, you brought it up earlier, and I'm going to agree with you. I think these young people are smarter than a lot of us know. They don't see it like we did. I grew up. My dad was Archie Bunker, Carol O'Connor.
Sure.
My dad was Archie Bunker. You want to hear the N-word said all the time? You know what's interesting about that? 8 kids. We came out of there. You don't hear any of them say that. And you don't see that racism just because that's where he came from. I think his kids took it as, we don't appreciate that. We couldn't really say much because the way it was in those homes, Irish Catholic, and it was the way it was. And, he was on a destroyer hit by a kamikaze. And,
right.
He came out of there with some serious issues. And the race stuff, it wasn't, I certainly wouldn't blame him for it. We had the 67 riots, 68 in Detroit. you ever hear that song, Black Day in Detroit?
No, I haven't.
Well,
I'm not a Michigander, so there's a lot I don't know about the state.
It's a Gordon Lightfoot song.
Okay.
And I love Gordon
Sure.
Lightfoot, from his Edmund Fitzgerald
Sure.
things. And as far as our country and the young kids, you're right. And I also hear him say, and know you hear this, 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds reelected and, into Congress and Senate. And the choices for president, if Biden didn't go wacky, the president choice would have been a guy who's going to be 90 by the time he gets out, or another guy that's going to be 90.
Right.
So you hear it on campus. These kids, they tell you that, right?
Sure.
I mean, you hear it all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What do you think
About what?
about that age in
I don't know.
Congress? Term limits?
Term limit. Well, there's term limits and there's age. I don't know if somebody does. If you think about other things, other crafts, if somebody is a really good brick mason, somebody's a really good plumber, we're not giving them age limits for doing their work. So I think it's got to be an individual choice on that.
Well, they don't have to take a test, so they fail. Everybody fails as you get
Sure.
in your 70s and 80s. Scott, they didn't even work. When they were old, our parents
Right.
and things, they were kind of done by 65 or so. And I'm not saying they were failing, but they stick along way too long in Congress. And so,
Well, it's the people who are, it's the people they don't vote themselves in, so people are voting them in. So
yeah.
absolutely.
Well, did you always want to be a writer?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I didn't, both my parents were college educated, first generation for my mom, certainly, probably first generation for my dad too. But, they were literate. There weren't a lot of books around the house, but I was interested in books early on. And I think it was probably in college that I thought, well, maybe this is something I can start to do. But it took a while to figure that out, absolutely, and to try to figure out how to make a living as well.
Well, I'm not going to dwell on politics, but I'm going to jump back there just for a quick second. 87% or so of Americans, I don't believe, trust or like the politicians we have today. Kind of like EVs, this electric vehicle. Who jammed those down our throat? Our political people. And let me tell you, this I can speak to. You
Okay.
can speak to the writing. I'm going to speak with you about being a manufacturer's rep.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
For 10, 15 years, this EV stuff has been coming down the pipe. Well, I call on General Motors, Chrysler, Ford, and I go to the Dyno Labs for Ford in Dearborn, and I go to the Chelsea Proving Ground for Stellantis now, which was Daimler and Chrysler.
Right.
They change names like people change underwear. But the thing about it is, I never talked to anybody there that wanted those EV vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
And the way they're trying to jam it, and you know what? They're finding out the American people don't want them. And guess what? They're not going to buy them. Even with the incentives, I mean, that's a mess.
So how can you explain then why didn't Ford announce that they were going to turn all of their cars into EVs at a certain point? I mean, didn't they make that decision on their own or not? Explain to me. I don't know how that works.
Oh, I think the incentives from the government, Scott, there's no question it was jammed down their throat. It was kind of like play by these rules or not. Had Ford done it, it probably would have been genius. Just like when they didn't get bailed out when Obama and Bush pulled them all out, when they pulled Chrysler and GM out of the gutter.
Right.
And Ford said, "Hey, we don't want the money."
Right.
And Ford really did well. Yeah, I think any of them, honestly, I think if one of them had done that and said, "No,
Right.
we know the people aren't going to buy them." And
Right. So you think that the auto companies have all been forced to do this, that they don't want to do it?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And forced under the Biden administration, forced under the Trump administration, forced under whatever the next administration is going to be?
Yeah, you want an honest answer?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm asking.
No, I'd say honest answer, Biden. Biden and his group. Biden's told what to do anyway, so I think it was just jammed down his throat as he's going to make. It's the Green Deal. Who was it? Al Gore and all those other guys and AOC and her group. This green, green, green. While China pollutes the whole world in front of our eyes, that it all works its way over here too, right, Scott?
Right.
So we're just a piece of that puzzle, and I think no, I don't think there's any question that was jammed down their throat. And
So, do you think there's climate change, or are you not sure, or what you're thinking on that?
I believe there is.
Okay.
But I believe there always has been too. So
Okay.
that's and I'm no expert, so you're
Sure.
asking the wrong guy.
No, but I'm just sort of curious because if these predictions, I mean, the glaciers are disappearing, you're getting more storms. I mean, if you look at kind of all of that data, it seems like a lot's going on. I'm not a scientist. I know that scientists are concerned about if we get to a tipping point. So the question is there anything we're supposed to do to slow that down? And is, going to electric vehicles, is that something that's good or something that's not going to make any difference? It seems like you're saying that most of the pollution is elsewhere and that we can't do much here.
Well, I don't think it's gonna. We're gonna make that much progress if we don't have any. If everybody's not on board and China's not on board,
Okay.
you know that, Scott. China does what they want when they want. Dictator,
All right.
I want the planet to be great for the kids, and
Sure. You have a brand new grandson right now.
Yeah, last night.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
Hey, that's really cool. Yeah, my son Jeremy and Maggie had a baby last night.
Right.
Thanks for reminding me.
Exactly.
But no, that was there over in Beaumont, and as soon as we finish, we're gonna head
That's
over
great.
and see the little one. And but in Michigan, American history is not taught until the 8th grade. What do you think about that?
That surprises me. I mean, my gosh, we were learning bits of American history when I was, a young elementary school student. But I don't know if we had a class. We didn't have a history class. I mean, up through the 6th grade, we just had sort of a homeroom teacher
Geography.
who would teach half the time, and there'd be units on whatever. I'm trying to think when history was taught as a class. I'm surprised about that.
Are you friends with Mitch Albom?
No, I don't. Although I teach his book on the Fab Five, which is really a terrific book. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I perfect connection. That other one he wrote, what's the one he's most famous?
Tuesdays with Maury, right?
Yeah, we've seen that play downtown Detroit. That
great.
old hockey area. My daughter Laura took us down there as a gift, and we ate at Joe Muir's right at the Rensen, and then went in that little hockey town thing.
Right.
And then my wife and I saw it again up north. At Bay Harbor.
Oh, that's great.
Oh yeah. It's yeah, Mitch is pretty special. A really close friend of mine. He was sitting where you are. Is Ed Kelly. We've gotten to be really close friends. Ed's Tori really could tell you he's a great guy. He's the funny man for Mitch Albom, and he's a Canadian, and he's the man of 1,000 voices. He's really a funny guy.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, we've done. He was with us when you and I first met.
Oh,
Remember?
okay.
Was it Bridges over?
Bridges Beyond Boxing or whatever.
That's
it's called.
right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So he was with us there, and Ed Kelly. He's just a great guy and does 1,000 impressions.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, we're gonna go see the Grinch at the Purple Rose.
Good. Have you had him on your show?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah,
here.
I bet he'd be great.
It was weird to sit with a comedian.
Sure, I bet.
Because he's making these noises, and I'm trying to talk to him.
That's funny. That's funny. Mitch would be a great guest if you could get him.
Yeah, we're working on Jeff Daniels right now. But,
Oh, good.
Oh, yeah, Mitch. And Dick Purton's another one we're shooting hard at. And Ed Kelly goes to lunch with Dick Purton maybe they like to go to Buddies together and with some other friends. Joanne Purton. She's on with Jason Rathiel, 104.3 WMC. Jason was on here. Actually, he was probably funnier than Ed Kelly. Jason, he's a morning guy,
Right.
big guy, and he was hilarious.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, we've had some super guests. I'm telling you. We're shooting for Aiden Hutchison right now,
Mm-hmm.
and we've had Darren McCarty.
Who's your wish list? Who do you really want?
I'm really kind of shooting for the stars. I really do want. I want Tim Allen, and I'd like to get Jeff Daniels and Aiden Hutchison. I think those are right now. They're the three biggest. Mark Messer is going to come.
Mm-hmm.
You know Mark, All-American Michigan.
I don't know him, but I know who he is. Sure.
Oh yeah, he's coming back. The Oregon game is this Saturday. Michigan's going. Oh God, how's that game going to turn out? Oregon's number 1 in the country, and Michigan's still looking for a quarterback. But yeah, Mark's coming in. He's being honored, I guess, or he's helping induct 2 guys into the Michigan Football Hall of Fame.
Oh, great.
He was an All-American from Catholic Central
Mm-hmm.
to Michigan, All-American at Michigan, got drafted by the Los Angeles Rams with Mel Farge Jr., who we had on, Brother Rice, UCLA,
Right.
and they were roommates.
Right.
And I got a message from both of them this morning, Mel Farge Jr. and Mark Messner. Hey, Ron, congratulations on the new baby.
That's great.
Yeah,
That's great.
They're cool guys.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it makes you feel good,
Right.
They reach out and do that.
So let me ask you, are you a Michigan fan or a Michigan State fan, or are you
100% Michigan from this high
all right?
forever.
Did you go to Michigan as well?
My wife graduated from Michigan.
Right.
I barely graduated from high school.
Okay.
I flunked out of Catholic Central. And we're going to have their coach on, the varsity football coach on Justin Sasante.
Right.
They're second in the state behind Howell, and Belleville's third now.
Right.
Justin gave me tickets for the field last Saturday night, so I went down and stood. They played. It's a great rivalry. It's the city champion against the Catholic League champion. So it was CC against Detroit Martin Luther King.
Right.
CC kind of had their way with them. They've got a team this year. They're really good.
That's great. And what do you think about Michigan? What do you think of the prospects? What do you think of the new coach? All that.
I like the new coach. I just think, and he's got to take responsibility. In my mind, it's the head of the fish. It's always the head of the fish. It was his responsibility to get a quarterback, and they couldn't figure it out from the time Harbaugh left. Could have got one in the portal. That was a major mistake because everything revolves around that quarterback. And what do you think? I mean, I don't know.
No, I don't know. You follow
here.
it more than I do.
Oh, yeah, I do follow it.
Right.
We watch every
Yeah.
game. My son called me when they beat Ohio State
Right.
about 2 years ago. They
Right.
beat them down there. He said, Dad, where are you watching the game? I said, we'll watch it together. He said, not this year. I've got 2 tickets to Columbus.
Right.
Well, we hadn't beaten there in 18 years or
Right.
something.
Exactly.
So we didn't know what to expect, but that team was special last year. You had to catch a lot of that, didn't you, Scott?
I did. I taught JJ, and I
Oh,
taught a
did you?
number of players and stuff like that. Yeah, no, absolutely. It was very. I think I had a lot of excitement, but a lot of relief. It had been for the winningest program in college in football
Since
it's been a long
1997.
time.
Yeah, we had a guy from '97 team on here too.
Mhm.
He's a local Brighton kid.
Mhm.
We had him on the show, and Clint Copenhaver. He was linebacker
Right.
with Charles Woodson.
Right.
Why should we learn American history, Scott?
Well, it's the only way we can learn who we are and where we're going and what we need to do. I think one issue that we have in this country is that different groups of people, quote, remember the history different because they had different experiences. If you talk to a white family about the 1950s, well, that was great. It was Eisenhower and it was sock hops and poodle skirts and Buddy Holly and all that. If you talk to an African-American family, they might bring up the murder of Emmett Till. They might bring up, what's going on in the South, discrimination and all that. All of that stuff happened. We only have one history, but we tend to just remember the part that applies to us, and we don't remember the part that applies to others. So I think if we can get, we are horribly divided at this moment in our country, more so than since the time of the Civil War, which my next book is about. And I think that one reason we can get a better sense of where we need to go as a country is if we have an honest understanding of where we've been from, and what's happened. So I think it's very important. I think it's part of your civic duty, really, to understand the past. Well, let me ask you about your new baby. You've got a new grandson here. It's your 6th grandchild.
Yes, sir.
So what kind of a world do you want him to grow up in? What are you fearful of in the future? What do you have promise in, and what do you hope his life is going to be like?
Well, I hope his life is about family first, I guess, country, God, all those things.
Mm-hmm.
But I hope he can enjoy a happy life, and he can have a life where there's opportunity for jobs, and this racial stuff will be gone, and the wars will be gone. When we were in high school in the 70s,
Mm-hmm.
We would listen to Cat Stevens' Peace Train.
Mm-hmm.
And we had this thing where we really believed that the wars were going to end.
Mm-hmm.
We had that faith, and look at today.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope he lives in a peaceful world, and he's happy, and he has opportunity to work hard and do well, like we have. Our
Right.
family has done.
Right.
Are
you worried about climate change for him at all?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I am. I'm worried about Great Lakes. The pollution, and you look at Lake Erie's a mess, especially down in South Michigan area.
Right.
But that's from all the pesticides and everything. Oh, and then that would go to one real quick is why he's on Trump's bandwagon now. Trump got a lot of guys, Elon Musk and Bobby Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons Bobby Kennedy went with Trump was because he believes he's going to be able to implement some of these things on the food. What's in the food is garbage, right? It's all pesticides, and we're trying to buy our meats and things from someone who has split a cow or a pig
Right,
with people
right.
like that, and we're trying to just eat healthy. But you look at, you know how it is, Scott. You look at a loaf of bread, and it's this many ingredients. There's 500 things. That's not good.
Right.
So I hope he can eat healthy.
Right.
And I believe, just like the pharmacists in this country, the FDA in this country, I think they get a zero. The pharmacists throwing these drugs at people. Guy, how old are you?
I'm 70. I turned 70 this year.
Okay, I'll be 68 in January.
Right.
So we're close.
Sure.
So what I believe on that is that as far as what they've done with drugs, we had a football player friend. Dad's a friend of ours. He ran Brighton Youth Football here, and he died. He seems to make it on every show. We talk about Cullen Finnerty, won 3 national championships as quarterback at Grand Valley. So they fed him these drugs, and hey, he had to put them in his mouth. However, that pharmacist lost his license, and Cullen had some problems, I think, at Grand Valley with, hitting and his helmet,
Right.
with that. But, what is it? The average people your age and my age, I think they take like 6 to 10 pills a day, and
Right.
my wife and I take 0.
Right.
We're trying to work through diet. I need some work on
Right.
it. Don't we all?
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But no, I think the pharmacy, all that, I don't.
Well, that's
I just
really
don't
that's
trust
so interesting. I have a different look.
Do you?
Yeah, I grew up in a family of scientists, and
Okay.
I know that the drugs that I've continued to take and have been given
For what?
For heart conditions. I'm a 2-time cancer survivor as well too.
Oh, wow.
and have been cancer-free for more than a decade. I've found traditional medicine, in my case, to be a lifesaver. And I've found that to be a case with many of my aunts and uncles and other family members. I know there's a lot of people like you who are distrustful of all of that. And but I guess my experience has been a good one. I mean,
Well, Scott, I'll tell you one thing. What happened was just a couple weeks ago, the grandson's 12, and he was playing football, and he thought he broke his thumb.
Right.
So they took him into the hospital or the urgent care, and they worked on him. And my daughter didn't see anything in the portal like that night, and I think she waited till Monday, and there's nothing. There's no report. He's 12 years old.
Right.
So she calls over there, and she says, where's the information on my son?
Mm-hmm.
They go, oh, he's 12. We send that to him.
Uh-huh. That's kind of bizarre.
That's what we thought,
Yeah.
It was like, what are you talking about?
Right.
They sent it to him.
Right.
She said, well, send him the bill too.
Yeah, right. While you're at it, exactly.
But I just think people, back to the grandson a little bit, I hope people have more rights. I think our freedom of speech, which we're doing here, that's why I love these podcasts, because you can say what you believe. Now, you don't, we don't know if we're right or wrong, but I mean, at least you can say what you believe. I'm not afraid to say anything on this show.
Sure. You shouldn't be.
Offend anyone.
Sure.
You got to say what you believe, and I just like this book, The Secret Game. It's like, it's great. You talk about race relations, and when we were down there, what I was getting at in Birmingham, Alabama, you hadn't been there before?
Oh, I've been to Birmingham, sure.
So I'm down in probably Mobile, and I like to get convertibles when I go to work. So I'm working down there at Acme Steel Company and some of these huge steel companies in Mobile, and take the long ride, 4-hour ride or so back up to Birmingham.
Yeah.
So I get into Birmingham, and I got the convertible top down. It's been a long ride. I'm looking for a spot to park, and I pull in front of this church. And I look up, and then I look at the street sign, and I look back, and I'm looking at the church. And this lady comes running out to me, and she says, a big black lady, she says, you can't park there. And I'm like out of the car stretching. I said, oh, ma'am, I just drove 4 hours. But I said, is this the East 17th Street? I think it's 17th Street Baptist Church.
16th Street.
16th.
Uh-huh.
I said, is this it? And I got like this, like the hair on the back of my head was standing up. I go, yeah, are you kidding me? You know this. You wanted me to tell the story? You want to tell
I know. You go right ahead.
The way I understand it, and I did look around and follow that pretty good. And so there's a park across the street, and then there's a big museum, Black History Museum, right across the street too, and this big park. And here's the way I got it. The lady, I was joking with her. I said, hey, I'm sorry. I just drove 4 hours. I just want to sit here for a second to stretch. So I'm standing outside, and we hit it off,
Right.
She says, oh, young man. She goes, follow me. Pull your car around. Pull in where the pastor stays in the church.
Right.
I go, sure? Yeah, pull in. So I pull in. She gets me out of the car, and we go into take the elevator down in the basement into where the girls were. And the Ku Klux Klan threw a bomb into a church service. It was a black church, and 5 or 6 girls were killed. They were like 9, 10, 12 years old. So it was just unbelievable. And Martin Luther King had spoken there, and I started looking around. I said, well, where are these girls buried, to the lady? And she says, oh, I'll take this street down, turn left on 11th, and turn here, and you'll be there. So I pulled in there, and I tried to find their graves, these girls. Some of the most of the graves would have been like if you went and got a 50-pound bag of cement and you poured it in, and then they wrote like with a marker or a stick or something into the cement. The place was horrible. It was, I mean, these girls,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't deserve what they got.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to the museum after. The bus you brought up earlier,
Mm-hmm.
it was sitting there all burnt up. Or that was the Selma bus, I believe, was burnt up. It was, right?
Freedom Rides bus.
The
Anniston,
Freedom.
right. Mm-hmm. Right.
Anna?
Anniston, Alabama.
Okay. So that was my experience. It really affected me. I mean, really, it did in a good way, in a positive way.
How so? How did it affect? I mean, what did it change you at all in your behavior or?
My behavior was always, I don't have any race issues.
Okay.
Didn't affect me that way. It just affected me to be in that spot, and walk down and she took me over where the bomb came in. I think it came into a little lavatory, the girls' lavatory.
Mm-hmm.
You've been there, right?
I haven't been inside the church.
Yeah,
no.
she took me, this is where it came in, and then we walked outside, and this is where they threw this fire bomb or whatever they threw in, and I just couldn't, it just affected me. It didn't change how I always believed that way.
But how did it affect you? I'm just sort of curious.
It's just wrong, it's just not the way it's supposed to be,
Mm-hmm.
People. I'm just not a big guy on wars, and murder, the whole thing.
Right.
How would it affect you?
Oh, I think you would be sad and in awe of what had happened in a sad way. Absolutely.
The 30 people that we've had on, I always say, hey, you got to have a charity, a foundation,
Right.
or the veterans. Is there something you like to?
Oh, I think
support?
United Way has always been a great one to
Mm.
pick. Absolutely.
Is it?
Because that goes to lots of needy causes, important causes. Sure, absolutely.
And how about this? Where does the name of history? Where did the name history come from? What does it mean?
Oh, boy, you mean the word roots, the
Yeah.
word, I have no clue.
Wow, this
Beats
is
me.
great.
I'll have to look it up.
Well, I didn't because our teacher, our principal, Sister Juliet at
Right.
St. Agatha, she would come into our classroom, and one time we were in a history class, and
It's probably some Greek root, historico, or something like that.
well, it's simpler than that.
Okay.
And that was you're talking the 60s again.
Okay.
So put yourself in this little tiny Catholic school
Right.
of 40 kids, and
Right.
the principal, Sister Julia, walks in. She says to the whole class, "Where's history come from?" And we go, "Oh, I don't know." She says, "His story."
Right.
You
Right.
know, okay, that was it. But Scott, my first guest on here was a guy. His name was Jeff Minnock, and somehow this thing morphed into the veterans. He had a foundation.
Right.
It's called the Varsity Club Foundation in Howell, and they raise money and give it to kids all over Livingston County.
That's great.
Underprivileged. And
Yeah.
yeah, and that was really from day one what happened. And this varsity club, like I said, they're out of Howell, and him and his associates do a great job. They give thousands of dollars to kids and help kids.
That's great.
And yeah, and one of the things I wanted to say to you was he's written a book called Driven Through Tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeff's a friend of mine. He's been a friend for 30 years. And what happened was they were out on D19, a road out here, and he was in high school, great athlete, and he had two buddies with him,
Right.
great athletes. And they ran head on into a free press truck.
Oh, God.
Yeah, and he became a Brighton varsity football coach. Howell owned his own bar. I mean, he came out of it, but it was just a disaster in high school. It's like your worst nightmare.
Sure.
And he came through it, and I just wanted to mention his book is coming out, and it's coming out November 11th.
That's great. Congratulate him. That's fabulous.
Yeah, it's November 11th. It's called Driven Through Tragedy.
Great.
And Jeff's a great guy and an old friend
That's
of mine.
fabulous.
Yeah. Anything else you have to add?
Not so much. I will remember this interview forever.
Oh, you will?
Yes.
I appreciate it. I've enjoyed it. A couple of things real quick. The guests we've had, past ones with Mama Shu. Did you look her up?
No, I didn't.
Please look up Mama Shu.
Okay.
She's in Highland Park. She actually has the saying of triumph from tragedy. She was given $100,000 by Ellen DeGeneres. She's redone neighborhoods. DIA, Detroit Institute of Art, has helped her, and they've put gardens in, they put street lights in, they have a homework house. If you want to go down and visit with her, I'd be happy to take you. I've helped her.
Well, that's great.
And it was the day before Thanksgiving last year. We took this production and we went to her place in Highland
That's super.
Park.
Good for y'all.
Yeah, no, and we were trying to help her anyway with dumpsters or coats and jackets and money, whatever we can do to help Mama Shu.
That's great.
So when Darren McCarty, we've had, and Lance Parrish, Darren's a big veteran guy. He loves to do for veterans. Mickey Redmond, JJ, Jimmy Johnson. And we already talked about future guys. Coming up here on Thanksgiving or on Halloween is Justin Cesante,
Right.
CC's coach. And other than that, I just wanted to show we had Lance's book here, and the other one is Timothy Timber by our friend Peter Dante.
That's great.
Came in from Hollywood, and he's Adam Sandler. He's the quarterback in Waterboy.
Oh, right. Great.
Remember that
Yeah,
one?
yeah.
With Adam Sandler.
That's great.
So we're good. I appreciate you coming on. We've got one more thing to do, and I'll let you
Okay.
get back to Ann Arbor, okay? All right, we've got the Jess Pickles. These are the GD, and they're July 22nd, 24. Scott, you like pickles?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There you go. These are yours.
Thank you. Shall we try some now?
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Garlic dill.
There you go. Good.
I've done a few of them before.
All right. I'm going to take the first one, then you got to try one too to try the batch.
You got to rate it 1 to 10. That's the deal. 10 being the highest.
All right. It's right up there. 9.8.
You sure?
Yeah.
That's pretty high.
It's fabulous. They're great.
Nobody likes them. I usually get a 2 point or.
No, I like them. Absolutely. No, these are good.
No, our lowest was like 9.2. So I don't know if they just want to eat and say something nice and get the hell out of here.
Well, you try one now.
I know what they taste like. They're pretty good though, aren't they?
They're great. They're nice and cold too. All right, so you got to rate them now too.
Well, I always say 10. So
Well,
what am I gonna say?
all right.
No, I love them. So we've been making them for 20 some years.
That's fabulous. They're great.
Mm-hmm.
They're good.
You get to take them home.
Thank you. I'll look forward to it. They look great. They look really fresh. I love how crispy they are too.
We keep everything perfectly clean.
Yeah.
It's like an operating room when we do them.
Yeah, sure, exactly. That's great. I love that y'all do it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
I
Ron.
appreciate it. Nice to meet you, Scott.
Yeah, and congratulations on the new edition.
Thank you.
You bet.
Bye-bye.
You bet. Bye-bye.